Is this something you can sign off on, or is the boss coming in tonight?
He's not, and I can't. So,
Uh-oh.
I mean, I can sign off on that. So, I think I'll find the mailers because there's a little. Wait, I know.
Yeah,
Oh, you got it.
I
Okay.
got it.
Perfect.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to do the application. I know you guys have to sign it here, and I'm not sure why
No,
you didn't
you
sign
don't.
it last night, or
Well,
last week.
Okay. Yeah,
Anyway.
we don't fill any of that stuff in the middle. I don't believe so. Um,
I can hold it till next
oh,
week. I mean,
yeah, it might get busy tonight, but yeah, we'll sounds like we'll do a little sign up drive at the end.
okay. All right. I'll hang tight till then.
All right. All right. We ready, Dave?
Yep.
All right. All right. Let's get this started. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Cappy, will do the honors.
Bow our heads. Well, Father, we thank you for this day you've given us. Thank you for allowing us to perform for missions that are required for not only for safety but for lost people. Father, we just ask for those who are still in the air to give them guidance and give them safety. Provide those that are still en route to provide them with safety. Be with their families. Most of all, we just pray for this government. Amen.
Amen. All right, everybody. Well, you get me today. I think Andrew was doing his Form 5 today, so he's a little tuckered out. So I'll kind of go through his list of. I'll go through his list of. Having a little trouble here. For some reason. Well, let me know if I start echoing. I didn't have my sound turned on. He had his Form 5 today, so he's a little tuckered out. So I'll be running the show, much to everybody's chagrin, I'm sure. But it's also supposed to be Aerospace Day. Our AEO is out sick, so I'll make it as educational as I can. But usually it turns into a chat, and and we do have a lot of relatively new people, so we can always try to find a subject that people don't know a lot about, and we can we can have a good conversation. First, let's go through some updates that I got from the commander. Okay, so starting with the aircraft, so 743 Charlie Papa, which we also lovingly know as Cap 443, is out for the 100-hour service. So all of our open discrepancies will be addressed. Hopefully, we'll have nothing left. The aircraft tug in the hangar is in-op. Something apparently happened to it. Mike Swift will be in to fix that tomorrow. The question, well, there's an open question about when we're getting the carpets replaced, at least in the back. Soon. So I think measurements have been taken, and I think there's some quoting and stuff going on in the background. So that will be, as soon as we know, you guys will know. But it'll be good to have that dealt with. It's been a mess for quite a while now. If let's see, is anyone SUAS qualified? Dave, are you? I don't remember. All right.
Not me.
Yeah. Okay. So.
I have my commercial reading.
Yeah. Okay. Well, excellent. And I know you expressed some interest as well.
I'm working on it.
So, and neither one of you will be obviously qualified for anytime soon, but just to let people know, we do have actual missions for UAS, and in fact, there's an email that got sent out just today. In fact, I think there's well, it's a DR mission, so I'm not sure, but I think this one is actually going to be in support in Guam. So that is interesting. So just so people know, we do have those type of missions that come up for drone qualified technicians and pilots. Uh, I do not have details. I saw the email and I saw that too, and I was like, does that mean they're flying people over to Guam, or what does that mean? So, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting one. So, well, I mean, West Coast. I mean, I don't know. I saw another one come out too. I didn't get a chance to read the whole email. Apparently, there are some new federal guidelines on information and communications technology for ICS. So I know I've mentioned before, but brief recap for all everybody new. Part of Civil Air Patrol's mission and the emergency services means that we do roll up under FEMA in times of disaster and when there's support needed at an incident. The system by which the federal government and FEMA organizes incident command is called, it's in the National Incident Management System, or NIMS, and they specifically use the Incident Command System, or ICS. Most of us in Civil Air Patrol that are going to be doing anything regarding emergency services will go through the ICS program. So it starts with ICS 100 and 200, 700, and 800. Anyone doing anything is probably going to take those 4 courses. They're all online, fairly straightforward, fairly quick. There's that. That gives you a foundation of how federal agencies, local agencies, county, how they all function in terms of incident command. Apparently, I guess there's some roll up or roll fall down from the FEMA that they're going to change the way they do the information communications and technology. So those of us who are in that look forward to some changes there. I think, and that's a seminar. It's going to be June 28th. Probably looks like a webinar. June 28th at 6:30 Pacific. So if you're interested, I know I am. I'll be joining that. Reminder, next week, so every 5th Tuesday, this squadron, we forego the normal meeting format, and we meet in the hangar, and we have a little barbecue, and a little get-together. Don't need to wear uniforms. This traditionally came from keeping our night currency up, but I don't see how that works in the summer, since it'll still be daylight. But anyways, we call it Nighthawk, and it's just kind of it's a little get together we have in the hangar, and just a little bit of relaxation.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock as opposed to 7 o'clock. So take note of that. This weekend. Uh-oh. And it's like everything's automated now. I don't even pay attention to it. Wow. Okay. Let's see. The airport manager and anyone from his team has been invited to join us next week. They've tentatively RSVP'd. We invited the tower manager, Kevin Cox. No response from them yet. Andre has sent out an email asking for RSVP, so we know how much food to prepare. I think what we probably should do is guests, if you are planning to come next week and kind of want to be counted, make sure put a little star next to your name on the attendance, and we'll make sure you get counted. There's that.
The RSVP is fairly straightforward and easy to submit.
On the form, but if you're a guest, you won't have access to the form. So,
Well, guests come in free anyways.
we do. We don't. I thought we shake them down.
Oh, well, that's true.
Oh, well, I wasn't supposed to say that. Yeah, we say the quiet part out loud. No, just kidding. Yeah, it's just show up for next Tuesday, but we do want to make sure there's enough food. So that's what I'm driving at. Let's see. So there's been, I guess they've lit up the Coast Guard duty. So those of us that are CD qualified, they've been sending out requests for Coast Guard duty. The only issue is we don't have any mission pilots in the squadron that also have their instrument rating, because 2 years of Civil Air Patrol, 2 years total apparently, because I had 2 years total. Oh, thought you were raising your
Oh,
hand.
no,
So 2 years total time in Civil Air Patrol. Obviously, good standing in Civil Air Patrol, and it really, really helps if you have an observer or mission pilot rating. They do occasionally with an MS. If they're flying a 206, they can have an MS, but typically you need to be an observer or a mission pilot. Those missions are usually attached to things like the Coast Guard, Border Patrol, because we are doing sensitive operations around either the border or over the ocean or around other places where they want eyeballs. And so counter drug is it's fun. It's a little more of a commitment. So I've only done it once so far, and I think Andre and I are scheduled for next week. It is a 4-day commitment. So we're going to leave here probably Thursday evening, and we'll come back Sunday. And but the nice thing is they put us up in a hotel. We have we do usually 2 sorties a day, sometimes 3, but usually 2. It's a long day, but you'll get a lot of hours, a lot of camaraderie. You'll get to kind of see real missions being run with Civil Air Patrol as opposed to the training missions that we normally do. But it's, I'm glad that I made it past the 2 years to be able to do it now, because it is definitely a little more of a, this is what we're here to do. So, but they call it counter drug because I think initially it was, we were helping with, drug searches. But now it's a lot of more border is what we're doing, border and over water and whatnot. So I don't know. Is there any other missions that I'm not aware of because I haven't seen them?
home security.
Oh yeah, Homeland Security. Homeland Security.
And then you do photography work for emergency services.
And I think they also, some aircraft, like I don't think our aircraft has it, but the aircraft that have the infrared cameras, they take pictures of fields of a certain, a certain growing plant, so you can tell those by infrared as well. So, it's one of those things. First rule of Flight Club, you don't talk about Fight Club, but it is interesting, and the main goal is just be in Civil Air Patrol, be qualified to be either observer or mission pilot. And sign up, be ready to go, and you'll get to see another sign of things, and it's a little more, the term that we use is we're professional volunteers, and it's definitely the place where you'll see that come into play, because we're around other agencies. It's not just Civil Air Patrol, so the way we operate on the radio, the way we interface with people. And there will be special requirements. For instance, the duty that we do down south don't wear uniforms. We're not supposed to wear uniforms, so it's it's a little bit different of a mission. So, but it's fun. I enjoyed it. That's why I signed up to go again. But that's counter drug. Sorry, long-winded. So, like I said, those of us with CD, just be aware that they are doing over water missions now with the Coast Guard. The only thing I'll say is we had water survival training earlier this year. Was it this year? Yeah, earlier this year. I don't know when they're going to do it again because water survival training is required for the over water missions as well. If you don't know how to swim, that is not a disqualifier for water survival, because what I would advise, because there was someone in my group who wasn't a strong swimmer, go buy a PFD, a personal flotation device. Wear it when you do water survival. Pop it, and because that is totally acceptable, because we are supposed to be wearing PFDs when we're over the water. So, but I actually had to remove my PFD and put it on someone during training. So,
Aren't they supplied during the mission?
during most of our aircraft have PFDs. I'm kind of the mind of you should know your PFD. I mean, you can get one for $50. And of course I do fly over water, my plane, so I wear a PFD in my aircraft, so that's why I have one. But again, you'll go through. There's a quick online course that you take about water survival in general, and especially it has both information good for the pilots and information good for everyone else in the air crew. Things about what are the proper ways to ditch and that type of thing, which really puts your mindset as to what we're doing. And during the water survival training, you will wear a flight suit, or you will wear these clothes. Typically you won't wear boots, but you'll wear some sneakers you don't really care about, because they want you to be not in swim gear. You need to feel the effects of being in the water with full clothes on, and we have to tread water, we have to swim, and then we have to ingress and egress raft. For everyone who thinks that sounds easy, the raft is not as easy to ingress as people think it is. So I'm glad that we all went through the training. At least we don't have the simulator where they put you in there and dunk you in the water and flip it over. So we don't have that. But so anyway, so water survival is pretty cool. Next time it comes out, even if you don't plan on doing it, it's a kind of cool half day. You should definitely do it, because it just enables you to be able to participate in these missions in the future. Group 8 SARX. I think they sent out an incorrect date, but it is going to be the 10th and 11th of June. So, again, for everyone new, this might be a little preemptive, but the main reason that most of anyone who hasn't already been to a SARX, the main thing that this squadron is concerned about SARX is anywhere near us, and Group 8 is further south, so it's pretty close, San Diego area, is to get your mission scanner rating, because the mission scanner rating is the first rating you need to get to be going on to Mission Observer or onto Mission Pilot. So if you don't already have the mission scanner rating, SARXs are the best place to do it. In any other rating you're going for, if you're going to be base staff. So everyone needs to be a mission staff assistant first. SARXs are always looking for mission staff assistants. So, making the drive down to a SARX, spending a couple days just, doing whatever work needs to be done. That is a very quick and easy way to get your mission staff assistant, and then move on to communication unit. Communication unit leader, logistics, any of the advanced base ratings. So, so if you're interested, 10th and 11th June. I don't have the oh, there it is. San Diego Senior Squadron 57 is hosting, and it's going to be at Gillespie Field. So, not super far away. Where I don't see anything here about us sending a plane, and it might be a little early for us to send a plane down, because even if the 100 hours done, we'll probably be under the hours to do missions with it. Anyways, there's SARX. Another SARX. This is a Group 1 and 3, so we are Group 3. A joint SARX hosted out of Whiteman Airport, just next to or above Burbank. That's going to be June 24th, 25th. That might be more interesting to the people in this room that are about to apply, because you'll probably be members around that time, and if you can set aside those days, it's a great way to kind of knock that out. But you do have to kind of hit the ground running when it comes to getting your initial GES and things like that. It's super quick, but just if you are kind of wanting to get this stuff taken care of, that's another date to think of, June 24th and 25th out of Whiteman. And typically, our squadron, if it's going to be Group 3, our plane will probably go at some point. Whether we're flying it or not is always the question, but most likely some of us will go. And if you're like, I can't get to Whiteman, I'm sure somebody will be going there, and either you'll catch a ride with one of our CAP aircraft. I don't know what my schedule is going to be, but in my aircraft, if you can fit through the door, you're going. So that could be, I could just do shuttle work on that day. Okay, so yeah, June 24th, 25th, Whiteman, Group 1 and 3 SARX. So you've got 2 SARX opportunities coming up, and like I'm telling you that these training opportunities are very valuable, and especially for any of us who are not new that need ratings done, these are the places to do it. It's going to be food trucks, and Corona's a bit eclectic, so you've got a lot of people with old restored warbirds and biplanes and all kinds of crazy stuff at Corona. So if you like aviation and you just kind of want a day, bring the kids. That's a good thing to go to. And again, I'm a little biased because that's the airport that I fly out of, and they've been really trying to step up the events that go on there. So June 17th. And if you're interested in just kind of carrying the CAP flag, and because like I said, I will probably be there and I'll most likely be in uniform. It's just a matter of being there and telling people what the mission is here at CAP. So if you've got time to do that, mark it on your calendars and head out. Any questions on anything that I have mentioned so far? Silence. All right. And let's see. Let's see. How many of you? This is the third night. Four. Okay. So I'll make sure we'll set aside some time to get your forms and fingerprints done, and prepare for the fun of waiting for national. In the process, we've probably talked about it quite a bit, but the process is pretty straightforward. You'll submit all that stuff. You'll submit your check to national. Remember that there's national dues and then there's the squadron dues. Those are separate because we have to pay your what we call OPSEC done. I mean, you probably know OPSEC, but it's for Civil Air Patrol. There's nothing secret and super secret in Civil Air Patrol. We're a civilian organization, right? But we do have different classifications of information. So, for example, for communications, the actual frequencies that are assigned to all of our repeaters, those are confidential information, right? They shouldn't really be out there because we don't want media listening to, transmissions when we're trying to do disaster work. And OPSEC is just the explanation of that. Have to do that to get into e-services. Once you're into e-service, else to do right away. But I've got on our website, I've got a new member guide for like what you should be doing in your first 90 days. And it's very straightforward. You could literally knock it out on a weekend, but our thing is 90 days. But the main thing is read and sign off on the equal opportunity, read and sign off on cadet protection. So even though we are a senior squadron, all CAP senior members have to read and understand the cadet protection guidelines because you'll be around cadets. You need to know what our rules are about engaging with cadets, because they are the one thing that is very, very hot topic in CAP. So, and it's nothing magical or like, oh, I didn't know I shouldn't do that. It is pretty basic stuff. Don't be alone with cadets. Don't be alone with cadets. Don't touch cadets. Don't have relationships with cadets. It's pretty straightforward stuff. So get through those as quickly as you can. So get set up in e-services, get through OPSEC, get through EO, get through cadet protection. And then the other thing, the last thing I'd add to that, and this is all on the website, is do your aircraft ground handling. It doesn't mean that we want you to handle aircraft, but it's the knowledge of being around Civil Air Patrol aircraft so that you can be safe. Know that anyone around an aircraft can call knock it off to, if you see something, say something. The incidents that we've been having with hangar rash and things on the ground have been increasing. So it's very important that you do understand around being around the planes, and when you are designated to be a wing walker, you know what that means, which make sure the plane doesn't hit something. But get through those as fast as possible, and that kind of sets you up for, getting into the rest of CAP as you will. Because until you complete level 1, you're kind of locked in what you can and can't do. So what we really like to see is people get through that within the first 90 days, preferably faster, because like I said, we have all this training stuff coming up, and if you can at least get through level 1, you're open to do all that stuff now. So questions, comments?
On these SARXs, do you make your own arrangements where you're going to stay during them, or how does that? If it's going to be one that's not, something that you can return home to, you're kind of on your own, unless other senior members are getting together to like, hey, we're all going to, do this, or, we're all going to camp out in somebody's house. I don't know. Because there are bivouac ones that we do where you're out camping, but again, that's more ground team stuff. But if it's nearby, then it becomes a matter of, is it too far to drive and drive back? Because it is a full day.
That's a question you'll have to figure out. And what's going to happen is, as we get closer and we know who's going, is are we using a plane? Is somebody else flying? Just themselves, somebody else driving. This squadron does not have a van anymore, or any kind of vehicle, so we don't typically just get a vehicle and go somewhere. So yeah, it's a little bit on the adult side of things of you got to figure it out yourself if it's going to be away from us and if it's too far to do back and forth in one day. Um, that said, when there's interest, we make every chance available to get a plane. I mean, even if it's not our plane, to get a plane to move some people. Like that's something we absolutely try to do. So because I know Terry, Andre, both of them super happy to burn up a lot of hours flying. So
No, I just
and
wasn't sure if they blocked rooms in a hotel.
the the only time you'll see that is for wing conference and national conferences. You'll see where there will be a block of hotel rooms that you can get in on. You still got to pay for it, but you can get in on the block. That's where you'll see that. And that's another thing I'll probably mention why we don't talk about it a lot. But wing and national conference, they're fun events if you can go. A lot of us have very busy schedules and whatnot. It's just difficult to go. But if you have the opportunity to go, you absolutely should for two reasons. Number one, you get to see other parts of CAP and people doing what they do. If you're looking for training, there's a good place to do a lot of the training. But the last one is as you climb up through the senior member ranks. So senior member ranks are all based on our professional levels, right? So those professional levels have requirements. And one of them, especially at level 3 and above, yeah, I'm pretty certain level 3 and above, is attendance at those conferences. So just keep that in mind as you go kind of through your. Going to tackle a aerospace flying, especially. We do require the use of checklists. They're very extensive. You should definitely use them. But what I've started to find is, and even with me, it's still new. I use my checklist, but how you use them is kind of one of the things that becomes a thing that you should address as you go forward. Now, I do when I was trained to have certain things memorized, and I do a flow. And when I'm done with my flow, I look at my checklist and verify the list of things I just accomplished. And I, occasionally encounter things that I missed in my flow because you got a communication in the middle of your flow. If you have a passenger, somebody said something during your flow, because we're not following stuff, sterile cockpit. But just something, a topic to think about. And I know Cappy's probably got a number of statements about this, but do any of you have like procedures that you do or do differently about checklists? Let's see. I'm trying to think of how many people. Well, let's see. I'll pick on you because I know you're currently training. So how do you do your checklist?
I do it the same as you. I have all the components memorized of the checklist, especially when I fly often, and I'll do my flow. Then I'll go back to the checklist, check and verify that I completed all the steps. If I didn't, then I'll review that one step I missed.
Okay. Well, do you do all phases of flight?
That's what I'm bad.
And this is a free room. I mean, no one knows. FEA is not listening. Well, I don't know. We're streaming to YouTube, so maybe they are listening. But this is for entertainment purposes only. Some procedures have been skipped for entertainment purposes. Okay, so that disclosure's out of the way.
I mean, it depends on who I'm flying with. If I'm flying with someone new, or I'm flying with somebody who I'm teaching them something, I'll make sure to go through all the checklists, do it all professionally. If I'm flying by myself and I'm flying all the time, I have the checklist memorized, my cruise checklist, the landing checklist. It's all pretty simple, especially in the fixed scale.
Yeah.
So I won't look down at the checklist for those.
I've caught myself. I used to be really, really good about, because this was when I would actually use my GoPro and film myself flying, and I would talk to myself because that's what I was also trained to do, is make sure that I'm talking through all my procedures. And then
here I am. I noticed my past few flights because I don't have the camera on, that I'm just kind of sitting there silent doing my thing, and that's when I forget stuff. And even though I have a flow and even though I have a checklist, that's when it's like I'll land and I'm doing my after landing checklist, and it's like, oh, I never turned the fuel pump on. So if I lost my fuel pump, that would have been engine out, and that would have been super exciting. So, and then I was listening to a podcast just on my way here where checklist and the use of checklists, and especially those of us that are still kind of, I know you're training, right? Yep. Yeah. So how has your instructor kind of guided you into checklist usage?
Well, I have a couple of instructors, but like my main instructor
Oh,
usually.
which one? I probably know.
Oh, well, it's over here at Riverside Flight Academy.
That's where I was
so
training.
I go with Carson.
Okay.
Carson's cool, and then recently started flying with Jonathan because he was my ground instructor. But essentially, the first few times we go through the checklist and everything, but what Carson had told me was, start with like the front of the plane and then just kind of go around in a big old circle and take everything for the outside, for the pre-flight, yeah.
Mhm.
And then kind of like get just used to doing that, and then afterwards get inside, and then we would focus more on the checklist when we were inside, like actually go down the list.
I want to drill on something that surprised and dismayed me on my check ride.
Does your instructor, so the first time or first few times you did your pre-flight, did you do it slow and methodically, and did he explain why these checks are being done? Or is it kind of just look here, move this? Because I had look here, move this.
Honestly, I don't remember as much, but I know that it was mostly just explaining everything, and certain parts of it I would get quizzed on, like, why do you think we do this? What is this part called? What would happen if we didn't do this? What is the consequence of not checking that?
Okay.
And then after a while, like I memorized all that stuff pretty easily. But once we get onto the inside and we start doing the interior stuff and then the run up, then I start to get a little confused because there's just so many different things. At that point, yeah, we use the list just to glance over and make sure, okay, didn't forget. Even if I'm so certain that we got everything, there's always something. It's like, oh shoot, totally forgot.
Is he correcting you in real time, or is it a debrief kind of conversation?
Both. Like if there's something that I miss or something that I forget, a couple of times he would ask like a really big question, like what are you forgetting? What did you not do? Like something like that, and then I'm scrambling around like, oh god, what did I not do? And then I realize, okay, it was that. And then if there's something that I need to get debriefed on, then yeah, afterwards we go down and he's like, okay, so during this part you did this, you probably should have done that,
Mm-hmm.
stuff like that.
Have you gone through the exercise of, and I know this, I'm not trying to make it sound condescending or anything like that. Have you actually like read through the POH for the aircraft that you're flying?
I don't think I have, honestly.
So, and I'll say that this was something I read the POHs, but it's kind of like just in the back of my mind, whatever. So my DB really beat me up on my knowledge of the pre-flight. So, for instance, do you check the alternator belt? Right? I mean, that is part of your pre-flight, right?
Yeah.
Why do you check the alternator belt? And what are you checking for?
I forgot. I know he explained it to me, but I don't remember.
And so these are the kind of things like a DPE, I went through my oral like, this guy's gonna be awesome. And then immediately started getting dinged on, why do you check the alternator? Why do you check the filter in front of the air intake? Like, I was like, should be there. And he's like, yeah, okay. And it really, it threw me off. Like, it threw me off in my check ride in a way that I shouldn't have been thrown off, right? Because I knew I can fly the aircraft, and I'd already been through the oral and, knowledge and all that kind of stuff. So, my thing is, when it comes to the checklist, what I found, and here's something.
Obviously, it helps a little more when you own the aircraft, but even if you're renting or you're in a club or things like that, sit down with the POH or download it if it's on PDF. Actually read it. And one thing I would definitely say is make your own checklist. Now, you should have an official checklist in the aircraft. Make sure that you have that checklist and you match it to what you've read in the POH. Because that's something, I had the incorrect checklist in the aircraft when I did my check ride, and that was like a big deal. So, that's my personal experience. But what it led to is I made my own checklist for my aircraft because the guy that sold it to me, the checklist is not for that plane. It's for a Cherokee 235 Echo, and I don't have a 235 Echo. I have a 235 original old school 235, and most of the stuff that was in, or some of it in that list, is just slightly off. So what I found is reading the POH, building my own checklist, and then eventually I'm going to send one off to Checkmate and have them, make me a nice laminated version of it. My knowledge of the checklists themselves have increased like significantly, and this is something I would say to all pilots. Like any plane that you're flying a lot of, like I know if you're renting and it's like a lot of different aircraft, but if you're flying a plane a lot, I would read that POH, make sure that the checklist that you're using is synced up to that POH, and then finally, why am I doing this check? Because things like alternator belts, that stuff, I've heard of that so many times. Of the alternator belt came off, you lose electrical in the aircraft, and now you've got this incident of I got no comms, I got no lights, and the engine's working just fine, but now you have this minor emergency that you have to get the plane down. Or things like the air filter. Like, I mean, it should have oil on it, and it should look a little funky because that's its job, is to trap dirt. And so, and then when I do my aileron checks and control checks and everything, you start getting into why do we check the range? Well, on my plane, my stabilator could rub up against a screw, and if that screw is loose and it comes out, it'll block my elevator movement, and we all know that could be super bad. So again, and what I've done in my checklist, in my pre-flight especially, is I annotated my pre-flight. Now I do use ForeFlight, but whether you're using ForeFlight or any other EFB, free or paid, most of them have checklisting. I annotate in my checklist. What am I checking for? So, I know you're itching to say something. I can see it.
Now let's go back to memorizing the checklist. Since when do we memorize a checklist? I want to ask this gentleman over here. And what is the purpose of memorizing a checklist?
It's a good question. So I think the purpose of, we memorize the checklist after going through it so many times and reading it. And then it allows us to have an easier flow as we go through with it.
What should we memorize?
We should memorize the first primary points of the checklist, the most important aspects of it.
Emergency procedures. And there's only certain emergency procedures that you memorize. Other than that, you use a checklist. A checklist is a challenge and response action. So you read this over here, and you look at the response, and you go down one by one, you're going to make sure that you don't miss anything. So I never memorize. Never. The Navy doesn't do it. The airlines don't do it. I was never taught in the Bonanza, going to the Bonanza school. It's always a challenge and response. And you can read that challenge and response. So when it comes down to instruments, I look at for 0, 0, 0, 0. So my horizon is 0, my airspeed is 0, my ball is 0. That's the only thing that stays 0. I only got about 4 items on the airplane. I start off with wet compass and my heading. I can slave it to where I want it, okay? But think about challenge and response. So I don't like to memorize certain things except for GUMPS. GUMPS is the last one because I want to make sure I got 3 green lights open.
Mm-hmm.
And one day I didn't do that. It cost me about 40 grand.
Didn't you get the horn?
It lasted for about 3 seconds and I hit the ground. I was doing a Navy landing, turn off on the first runway so I can get gas. And it went beep, and I was down. That was it. So anyway, forget about that. And that's only because a helicopter overflew me by 100 feet, scared the hell out of me. And I didn't see him, except the tower says, you got a helicopter at 1 o'clock. Next thing you know, there go the lights, cockpit lit up. I know, he says he saw me, but I doubt he saw me. So be careful about checklists themselves. There's only a few of them that really, that's the landing checklist and the takeoff checklist, which is going to be mixture, prop, and throttle. Okay. You got retractable gear, it's always comes.
And I would even argue if you have fixed, we always say, or at least what I've been trained is, welded and locked. Because they're not going anywhere, but to train yourself for a complex aircraft.
So you can do what you want, I'm just saying in my experiences, I never memorize the original checklist. The other thing I do, I make sure I walk through the propeller twice on my sternum. So when I pull my airplane out of the hangar and I get rid of the tow tractor, I start it on the left-hand side, check my oil. And when is the best time to check oil? How do you know how much oil the engine really has?
Well, you want to check it after the plane's been flown where the oil's been disposed.
That's right, within about 20 minutes at the most. That's gonna give you the most true accurate reading. So if it sits there for a week, it's gonna be probably overfull. So if I look and if I come back and I have enough oil, we'll say 11, I like to keep it around 10 and a half to 11, and it's reading 12, I know I'm gonna lose all the way a quart for my prop load on that thing. If I'm at high power settings, I may just take and add maybe a third or a half a quart. In the high power settings, that's when we're gonna burn it. But look at the checklist, talk to yourself. Landing gear, down one. Horizontal, generator off, air conditioning, whatever you got on that checklist. Talk to yourself on both sides. But when you start memorizing, you think you have it, but you're gonna miss something that's gonna be important. So I start on the left-hand side, open the galley, I check my dipstick. For a Cessna, how important is to check the dipstick for the oil and how should it be positioned? And why do we want to make sure it's positioned in a particular way? Which way should the handle be facing? Is it perpendicular to the engine or is it parallel with the engine?
I've never heard of this.
I want.
Oh, you want to lose a dipstick sometime, that's the way you have to do it. Because there's a little spring, like a Carter key, that's spring on there, and you got a slot in your dipstick, and that little spring load goes into that slot, and that keeps it from coming out. And it will only fit in there when the handle is parallel with the engine.
Oh, yeah.
If it's perpendicular, you're not in the slot, and you may lose it.
See,
And it has happened.
I got the lazy man's Lycoming because, mine just pops out the top.
Yeah. So there's a difference. Another difference why I look at checklists different. I like to check my mags before I even get airborne. I want to make sure that the left goes off and the right goes off, and I got both of them operating. And it says that you do that at the end of the flight. So something could happen between the end of the flight and the time you get airborne if you're not checking to see if you've got a ground wire that kills the magneto. That's my thinking. I want to make sure if I get an engine fire, I want to shut that sucker down. Where it says do it at the end of the flight. My Bonanza, I do it at the beginning of the flight.
Right.
Yes.
There's just little things that you start thinking about as time goes on for safety.
Enjoy, because I've noticed I typically fly Piper aircraft. So when I fly the Piper aircraft, I'm more comfortable with my knowledge and the memorization of the checklist.
Mm.
But when I get in different checklists like the Cessnas or whatever, when they have just slight differences between the checklists, I notice I always have to read through each line item like you said. Because even the startup procedure is sometimes different between the two aircraft.
Here's the other thing. There's no standard between a checklist for the FAA. They allow whatever the company makes up, they approve. And you're going to find a Piper different than the Cessna different than the Bonanza different than the Mooney. Each one has their own separate checklist. So memorizing is going to help you out if you fly in different aircraft. You're better off going item by item by item.
Yes, that's why I predominantly memorize the one I fly, and then I go item by item for this other one.
How many items have you memorized on that one checklist?
On my checklist, I would have pretty much memorized the whole startup procedure, the run-up procedure, takeoff,
How many items?
cruise.
How many items?
You mean how many components of it?
Yeah.
I want to say there's probably about at least 5 for each step.
So, okay, so you got 25 maybe, 30?
Probably.
You think you can miss one of those?
I do think it's pretty easy if I don't go back and check on the checklist after I do the flow.
I tell you, the challenge that I would posit to you is, because this is what's solidified it for me. get a GoPro, stick it up. Don't look it up. You can look up the cockpit if you want, but I have my position where I can see me. Like I can see the control panel and my hands and what I'm doing. When I don't talk and I don't challenge the response myself, that's when I forget things. And it's, I would say, at least 85% of the time. And it's, is it something that makes a plane fall out of the sky? No, but one day it could be. So when I started noticing is when I watched myself on camera, I was like, oh yeah, I can't do that anymore. Because I would sit there and I'd be quiet and I would, and did I do the checklist? Yeah, it looked like I did the checklist, but when I started going, so my checklist is electronic, so I have it like in my line of sight, and I actually it has a function where it does the challenge.
Oh.
So it'll say, lean, ground lean, okay, ground lean, EGT set, right? And it's just, it makes it sound more professional because it looks cool on the video, but what I started realizing is over time, that's what's made me better, is the fact that I just blindly follow that list, and if I find something that's a miss, like, wow, that didn't work well, I write it down in my notebook, and then I talk to somebody about, or I hit the Piper form, and I go, this didn't work, the POH says this. We had this conversation about, the POH specifically says on Pipers, as soon as your main wheels come down, bring your flaps up to get more weight on your wheels, to get more control of the aircraft.
You're like, you shouldn't be doing anything in your rollout. And both are correct, right? It's like you should not be doing anything in your rollout. But one time I was doing a bunch of laps in the pattern, and I said, you know what? I'm going to see how this works if I just don't do anything during rollout. And it got a little fishtaily. Like I had to do a lot of rudder to correct. And I said, okay, all right. So in my thing, I just say, on rollout, concentrate on rollout. And if I've got that second, and that's the only change I really made.
Here's the FAA on check regs. They want you to concentrate totally on a rollout of being safe and making sure you're going to stop before you go off the end.
Yes.
So if I'm worried about opening the window for a little air or raising the flaps or doing something, that's an immediate ground. Your history. You can come back. Pay him another $250 or $600. He just loves that.
600.
They're like 1,000 now.
Yes, so.
So anyway, just consider that. That's why you want to make sure you get off the runway before you switch radios and do that stuff. Now you can leave it on the radio and say you're clearing the runway. That's fine on the radio, but I don't touch anything until I'm completely off the runway and I'm holding short of that taxiway. I switch the radio and then I talk and then I raise my flaps.
And to
onto that, because Corona has taught me that yes, the rollout's very important, and we get rollers that come over. There's a tree line surrounding the runway, and you get rollers that come over there, and you'll be in your full, rollout, back pressure, and you reach down for the flap, and you'll get one wing that comes up, and it's like, and it's like, well, I had my correction in. Why did that happen? Oh, because a roller just came out. A gust of wind came over the trees and rolled in, and the whole time I see Bob in my like the back of my head going, yeah, you shouldn't be doing anything else. And so and then even Oshkosh, this last Oshkosh, there was a very gusty landing, I think on the first day or second day or whatever. And there was a beautiful, beautiful Cessna 185 tail dragger, and how tail draggers, this becomes an issue. And this guy, you see him fighting. He's fighting this all. Since I've got my arms out, I'll let you guys see. He's coming down, and he's you see him correcting, and finally he's really fighting the gust, and I'm sure they're giving him orange dot. If you haven't been to Oshkosh, precision landings or something you need to practice, because they will tell you you'll have this big long runway, but they'll say you need to land on the purple spot, and then you're aiming for the purple spot and they're like, hey, extend to the orange, so landings are a thing. It's super gusty, and this 185 is coming down, and he's fighting it, and he's almost sideways and touches down, does a 3-point touch, because he's like and and they're like, comes down, and everyone's clapping, and it's like, oh wow, he did it good. He gets 200 feet down. Just a gust drug his wing through the dirt, and I was like, that's why they tell us, pay attention on roundouts. And it's because, as far as he was concerned, he was done flying. Like, I made it. It was tough. I'm down. And with the tail dragger, it just picked his wing. It picked that opposite wing up, drug him down. And it was so sad because it was a beautiful Cessna 185. And, so just, more of what we're talking about is when we know the checklist, when we do the final landing checklist, we do the landing. And we really shouldn't be doing anything else until we're off, pulling off, the runway. But another thing I saw, and I've tried to do it, and I've supplemented by having my electronic checklist in my face, is I saw a student that was trained to use their checklist like this. So wherever I can't remember where they put it, either their leg or whatever, but whenever they use their checklist, they're flying the plane, and they did this because it kept their head up and out the window and, enough of their panel. And it also, of course, verified that they were looking at this list. So something to think about. I don't know if that helps or not. But, and then, of course, if anything, if you're, like I said, I have mine electronic. I've got 3 versions of it in the plane at any given time. And then I have my backup, which I need to redo. I mean, my official laminated one that I need to redo because it's not correct. Like, that was one of the first things I realized about this aircraft is it does not have a correct checklist in it. But it's also because it's 1965. And when I contacted Piper, because when I registered my serial number and everything, and I said, hey, I think I need an updated POH and I need an updated, this. And they said, yeah, they never issue checklists for these aircraft. And so I was like, what do you mean there's no checklist? No, you got to make your own. So
they're not always correct.
And they're not. In fact, you start looking at back in 1965 what we knew and what we know now. So much of it has changed. So I find myself in this, having to really qualify.
The checklist doesn't tell you. Okay, once you land, you keep control of that airplane until it stops, until the engine stops.
Oh yeah.
That's the only time, thing you should be doing.
Right. I mean, everything, another thing I said I got, chastised for was exactly what you're talking about, is as a student pilot transitioning to being a BPL.
My taxi operations were awful. And it was something that he brought up. I mean, he's like, you want to own a plane, right? Yeah, of course. Yeah, so why do you use so much throttle and so much brake? I mean, you should be able to pull the throttle to idle and the plane will stop. And I was like, well, we got this hill, because, don't, when a DPE says something, they already know, like, why you're wrong, and you trying to explain, your way out of being wrong, it never works. So I was like, oh, we got, taxiway echo is like uphill, and, we have to give it the gas to go up there. And yeah. But you're still at like, 1,200 RPM and you're holding the brakes. Like, that's no bueno. When you go over dips and things like that, you should, bring back pressure so that your prop doesn't, dip and get caught, which I've seen somebody do at Corona, because we have lots of little, dips and things. But again, even if I taxi my plane to gas and then back to my hangar, I use my checklist. Like, that is the one thing that I've really changed about my flying, is I never just kind of go, I'm just moving the plane. No, I'm moving the plane. I'm starting the engine and the prop is spinning. I use the checklist. Even it's a very quick engine start checklist, but engine start, taxi area clear, brake check, and I can't say enough that in your Civil Air Patrol career, when you do your Form 5s, it's one thing they will be looking at very intently. So if you're a little bit lax on checklists, warm it up, because our checklists are very extensive. We don't use the little small ones. They're big laminated things, and they're small print, and there's a lot of steps, and you will be checking the autopilot on every flight, even if you never use the autopilot. So, which I've incorporated into my, when I fly my plane, I check my autopilot, and I was like, and it's interesting, that is a good example. Like I've noticed in Civil Air Patrol, we check whether it's a CAP 480 or a GFC, we actually check the autopilot. So you make the autopilot do a move, and you make sure it turns the correct way. You make sure that you can overpower it. You make sure disconnects work. And I always thought, well, it's an autopilot. Of course it does all those things. The guy who sold me my plane always talked about the autopilot being a little bit wonky. And I was like, that's okay. And I found out it's because he never pre-flight. I asked him, I said, do you pre-flight your autopilot? And he's like, no, I turn it on, and when I get to cruise, I turn it on. And I read the instructions, the AFM for it, and it says the reason that you do test on the ground and then back to on once it's completed its check is so that the gyros spin up and kind of stabilize, so that it doesn't do its little hunt and peck thing in flight. And I was like, oh my god, like this again taught me, know your equipment, read the manuals, follow the instructions, and annotate to yourself. Because as we fly in Civil Air Patrol, they've mapped most of this out. We know our Cessnas, we know how they fly. But it's all of those checklists are built on their AFMs and their manuals. So, so I know another safety topic. I don't know, but I know I'm stepping on your territory. But questions, comments, any additions?
Well, I talked to myself. Even my check ride last Sunday, not this Sunday, the previous week. I hadn't flown in 3 weeks. So I had my check ride.
Oh, your flight
2 hours. Yeah, flight review. And but then when you hear me mumbling over here, I'm talking to myself. And Jim says, okay, listen. And then the other thing, I'll tell you what I'm doing. I don't let him sit over there unbeknownst. He's the first time he's flown with me. And I said, I'm going to tell you what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do here. I'm going to give you a brief on how to get out of this airplane if we end up staying on the runway. Otherwise, I'm going to say we're going to turn down Judson. He says, Judson, he says, it's about 150 feet wide. I said, yes, and nobody ever thinks about using that street at the end of the runway at Redlands as an emergency to put it in. They're always looking at putting it on Pioneer with all the trees and power lines. I said, I'll go down Judson. I said, all I have to worry about is a 3-foot wall on both sides and some orange trees. I said, I'll get in there and I'll get out of it. So, so talk to them, talk to yourself. Well, just watch the altitude now. Let's keep that thing. Where's the nose supposed to be? Okay.
Yeah.
Don't forget your crab.
And I think for me, it was over, for me, talking to myself to do my checklist and things like that, it was like it was the same way, or it felt the same as overcoming shyness on the radio. Like it felt weird until I watched like myself fly on camera, and I started realizing that this whole, I have it in my head and I know what I'm doing, I don't.
And then I started getting into just talking to myself, and it kept, because what I find is if I don't talk for long periods of time, like in cruise and things like that, I get a little wonky on the radio, like, the voice is a little cracked or whatever. So continually talking to myself, knowing that it's going on either my camera or just for my own edification, kept me ready to talk on the radio as well. So take that as it will. But I think we're right at about time. Oh, go ahead.
I just think one more thing that I like doing on the checklist thing is when I'm going to airports, especially new ones or even old ones, is making sure I have all the frequencies written down in order of who am I going to communicate to next. I brief myself on the frequencies, brief myself on the runway, brief myself on a specific go-around point. If I'm going to land past this mark, I'm going to go around no matter what, even if I can put the plane down. Just all the things that you think about before coming into land.
I do like those 4-flight checklists. You just hit, you can do it one at a time, and you hit it, and it marks it, and you're done.
Yeah, it marks it, and you can have it. So what I found really helpful is I use the speak function, and you can tune how fast or how slow it speaks. So it does the challenge, and then I see the response, and it's like, it's not quite having a co-pilot, but it's it's a reminder of this needs to be done. And also what I found is, because you go heads down when you're doing, especially my plane, things are all the way on the right-hand side. I go heads down, but she's still talking to me in my ear. And it means that the list isn't done yet. Because I've got used to, I do my flow, and I'm like, okay, I'm kind of done. Check suction. So, again, 4-flight, this isn't an advertisement for 4-flight, but you get your 4.5 in Civil Air Patrol. We do give you ForeFlight for free, and you get the military flight bag. So, you know, it's a great tool. It will help you, you know, organize your flight and situational awareness. At this point, you know, I would say, I mean, I intentionally fly without it occasionally to make sure that I'm not completely dependent on it. But for the situational awareness alone, it was great. And the other trick I did is on my check ride, because of course I didn't want my iPad out for, you know, that whole spectacle. I just leave it on, but in my bag, so I still got all the traffic alerts and altitude callouts in my headset. But of course, I'm not staring at an iPad and not having that issue during my check ride. So, but I think we'll wrap it up. Unless we've got any other questions, because I think I'll get you guys get your fingerprints.
Couple of signatures and
Yeah,
I'm ready.
signatures and applications, and other than that, dismissed.
Don't forget next Tuesday,
Next Tuesday.
mark it on the sheet.
That's right, RSVP, and it's early, 6 o'clock. So hang on.
You just want to star by the
Yeah, just so we know.